And then I have a short presentation to just talk about what I think digital sketching is, and then like some of the questions that I'm interested in. And then I'll get into the tutorial right after that. And you're welcome to just like interrupt and ask if you have any questions as I'm talking. Okay, so I thought this would be an interesting class to organize as I was sort of looking through the recent thesis projects and realizing that I think maybe just because of the really sudden move to doing things digitally, or I don't know, maybe a sort of like post-digital turn in representation, that there's a ton of examples across all of the programs of people using digital hand sketches, composite, like Rhino sketching methods. And I thought it was really great because it's happening just in every program, and that it could be an interesting opportunity to do a representation class that wasn't program specific. So we can sort of talk about one type of representation, even if people are sort of working on all different types of projects. And then I have a collection of examples, like artists who use composite sketch or collage or digital sketching techniques, which is kind of the collection of things that, I don't know, I think about when I think of digital sketching. And I think they're pretty helpful to look at when you're making a sketch in terms of the sort of composition or color or line type, so that sometimes if I'm making a sketch, maybe I would come to one of these and even just sort of copy some of the colors from it, or look for certain line types and see how they're using them. They're also interesting to look at to see how much the artist sort of reveals or doesn't reveal the tool that they're using. So this David Hockney one is interesting because it was made on an early Apple computer, and I guess all of the graphics are sort of coming from just the tools available because there's only, you know, a certain number of colors and line types available. So this one you could say is totally about the tool that's being used, where this artist is using sort of composite methods which start to confuse the tool that's being used. So he's really focused on trying to confuse what's sort of the real space versus the rendered space, and doing it sort of so well that you can kind of look at one object and just be totally unsure of whether it's a photograph, a rendering, or maybe a sketch. So he does a lot of these types of different composite collages, and the colors are really good in these too. Okay, and then I also have sort of a collection of questions, which are things that I'm thinking about and that I think can be revisited as questions sort of as you're working, or what kind of I'm interested in hearing from you all. So this is a screenshot from just earlier today, and I'm thinking about how sketching can facilitate collaboration in the same way that sort of in a desk crit we're used to having the ability to sketch with our professors, that suddenly when you move online it becomes really confusing. So for example, right now the only tool that I'm using for this is the Miro boards, and it's actually like quite horrible to sketch on, and everything's always moving around, and I don't know, it's maybe not the ideal collaborative space, but it's the sort of one space that I'm aware of right now that everyone can sketch together. So I don't know if there's some other alternative to this, but I would be interested in knowing. Also interested in looking at what the difference is between sort of taking a finished design and sketching it versus kind of using the sketch throughout the process. I think these ones might be examples of.
By that time, it was like I don't know, it's a physical model and tried to
Oh,
use.
someone's microphone's on. Sorry, I think Jonathan. Or were you asking a question? Okay. So these ones I would say is kind of or to me, they look like they're maybe a completed design, which has then, someone has decided like, let's represent this as a sketch. And then kind of maybe in the top one particularly just gone back and drawn it like seemingly from a single hand. This one I guess is more of a traditional sketch, and the lower two more of a composite. And then if you use the sketch throughout the process, is there some sort of trace of the sketch in your final design and representation? So I think this project, even though I don't know whether they actually used sort of digital sketching, that the result kind of appears as if they did. I know this project is about line weights. So it has to definitely has to do with the line. I'm not sure that it necessarily has to do with the sketch, but it seems like it kind of results that way. How is a sketch sort of different than a measured drawing? These ones are sort of interesting because they look like maybe it's a sketch of a rhino view, which I'm not sure if it seems to be taking on some measured characteristics from a model, but it's sort of no longer measurable once it's translated into a sketch. And then while sketching, if there's still a sort of place for the ruler, I think this outpost office, it's actually an animation, but I just have it as a photo here, was kind of a good example where this little white square actually moves across the page and determines the sort of dimensions of this design here. And so as an interesting example of like, is the ruler still relevant, and would you then use a digital ruler, or does some other piece become a sort of ruler when you're sketching? Also, I think to look at what line weights mean and the sort of new ways that you can define line weights and hierarchies. I think that the answer to this one is not so obvious. There's some conventions that you can use. So this image with the crumpled paper here uses a sort of convention of thick lines on the outside, and then a thin or dashed line behind. And then there's sort of made up conventions that you might use, like say taking a piece of paper and using that to sort of act as a physical layer that winds up in your drawing, and the sort of hierarchy of model to drawing to whatever this is under the drawing. And then I think I just wanted to, I don't know, also include that this I think is a useful tool for maybe writing texts or essays when you might want to like suggest a design idea, but maybe not have it worked out. So if there's, I don't know if anyone is interested in working on something like this, but that you can kind of make a 5-second design, but that sort of really relates to something that you've written. And I have found this useful in a couple of projects before, or for a sort of more conventional way, like illustration with text, trying to make a diagram of an idea. And then finally, I would like to ask what is a sketch model, and kind of bring in an idea of some physical information into the sketches. So I'm not going to do it today, but in the tutorial on Saturday, I'm going to show a really just quick way of 3D scanning with an app. And it's sort of up to you what you want to use, but I think that there is an opportunity to sort of sketch in real life and scan, and then maybe sketch on top of that. Okay, so that's all I have for this. Does anyone have any questions before I go into the tutorial? Okay, so I'm going to do Photoshop and 3D Paint today. And then I thought on Thursday, if everyone can just come with something to talk about that they made. And maybe I'll send out a Miro board, maybe. I think that's the best thing to do. So, and for the tutorials, I'm basically just going to start sort of large to small, and kind of go through some ideas about like massing in Sight today, and then zoom in a little bit more for the next tutorial. And I'd also just say, like, sorry that I am doing this with like an architecture skew, but it's the fact that there's someone from every program here. I think yeah, I couldn't possibly try to attempt something that accommodates everyone, but I think it's sort of, yeah, I think it's still sort of relevant. Okay.
Ashley,
so,
do you intend to, like, should we just like follow along, or are there like files that we should be downloading and trying?
Yeah, it's sort of, it's up to you. What's the best way to do this? I was a little bit worried that people wouldn't be able to follow along. Like, I don't know how everyone's screen is set up. It's kind of, I guess you can do like a small screen follow, and also, so it's up to you if you want to try to follow. I don't have any files, but what I would say is I'm just going to do using like Google Earth views today, because I think that's kind of a nice starting point. So if people want to just grab anything really from Google Earth and sketch on that, or you're welcome to just like follow along and see what's going on. Okay.
Well, sorry, will the, if we don't want to like follow along with our mouse right now, but like want to look at it later, will the recording be?
Oh yeah, I'll make the recording available. It's not, I think this is probably going to work in like a Google Drive that I'll send you after this. It's not totally organized right now, but it is recording, so we should have all of this. Okay, so for this, I'm going to minimize this. Okay, so I'm going to talk mainly about brushes in Photoshop, which I think is probably the main tool that you'll use. So if you just go to Window and click Brushes, this should pop up, and then Window Brush Settings. So these two tabs are where you'll find a lot of tools. Also, I would say I'm just using a mouse. I'm not using anything special. I don't think that you really, I mean, it sort of depends on the style that you want to sketch. It's definitely easier to use a like pencil or iPad. But I think you can sort of get along just fine with just a mouse. Okay, so in the brushes, the important thing to look at up here in the top is if you click on these three lines, get more brushes. So I've already done this, so you'll probably see that mine has a lot more brushes already loaded. And if you click on that, it will bring you to Photoshop or to Adobe Online, and you can just download download any of these. Let's see, so one that, I guess I don't have this one, I'll download this. And it's super easy to add these in. You just go to Import Brushes, find your download. I just got the Mongo brushes. And then click on it, and they should just automatically appear here. Yeah, they're down here. Okay, so all of the brushes will work with the brush tool. And then so if you just click on the brush tool and select whichever brush you want, some of the brushes will work with other tools like the eraser or the smudge tool. Let's see, where is it? Smudges here. And yeah, so if it doesn't work with whatever tool you click on, it's just going to automatically switch you to the brush tool. And then I guess the other thing to have open would be color. So if you don't have that open, just go to window color and open that. And then important to try to sketch on a layer. Okay, so for this, I think I'm just gonna use this to kind of sketch a sort of massing diagram on a site. And I'm just using this random brush here to block this out. And it's pretty straightforward, just click and it should use, yeah, it should work. And then to just change the color, I'm just eyedroppering by pressing I and selecting a color. I should be sketching on another layer. And then all of these brushes, so all of these brushes are editable. Let me see, if I just go over to a different brush type, maybe this one. So if I go to brush settings, you can change like just about everything you would want to change on the brush here, and then it will give you a preview at the bottom of the page. So you can make these sort of like quite different than what the original brush is. A bunch of, yeah, it's sort of super customizable. And then I'm gonna go here and just a good shortcut. If you just press the bracket keys, it will increase and decrease your brush size. Okay, so I'm gonna just use this to like sketch out a rough program diagram here. And I think it's sort of totally up to you how much you, like I'm sort of making it obviously sketched and like kind of blobby, but it's totally sort of up to you how you would make this finer or not. Another thing that I would like to do is kind of repeat some of the, some of the image information in that's sketched. So what I'm doing now is just, someone has their sync on. What I'm doing now is I'm just holding down Shift. And if I hold down Shift, it's just gonna automatically draw in only straight line segments. So that can be useful to make it look a little straighter. Okay, so, oops. Okay. Yeah, I think the sort of most important thing would be to kind of just go through yourself and just test out all of the brushes, because they each, I mean, have a really different effect. And some of them sort of like geometric ones or more patterned ones, I think could even be used as like taking the brush to make some sort of mass or site diagram just by taking the shape alone. This is really all I wanted to show in Photoshop. I think more 3D Paint is a little more useful. So does anyone have any questions about Photoshop so far?
Ashley, I had a question about how to bookmark a brush that you like, or how to put it into like a favorite folder. Is there some way to do that?
Right. I'm not actually sure, but new brush group. Group 2. Well, I see that you can make a new brush group, but I'm not quite sure where that went. So, totally sure about that. Yeah, I'm not sure about that right now, but if I find out, I'll let you know. Sorry. Okay, so 3D Paint, I'm gonna open now. I think the thing that is really useful about 3D Paint versus Photoshop is that 3D Paint is kind of equally between 2D and 3D. And it's also just kind of amazing that this is like the old Microsoft Paint has suddenly become this like bizarre 3D program. So basically when you open it, you're gonna get this white screen. You can also just go to open an image as a sort of background. I'm gonna open this one. Thing that's kind of strange about opening this as a background is that you can't like move it around at all. So it looks pretty 2D right now, but if I just click right here, it goes into 3D view, and it's a little weird to get used to just because it's something about the scroll and rotate is very different than other 3D programs. But the other option for putting any type of image in is I can just turn off the canvas and then put the image in as a sticker. And if you see here, it's just opening to the preset stickers. But if I do custom sticker and then go to put my image in, now it's gonna, once I put this in, I have to click make 3D. And this is just gonna put the image in this 3D space. And now it's gonna be scalable. I can move it. And I can also use some of these, the magic select tool, which isn't great, but if you want to select a portion of it, it actually worked. It worked well to get rid of that, but it will pretty much only do obvious differences. It's not really as good as Photoshop. You can get rid of, or you can separate this. That one actually worked really well. Usually it doesn't work that well. The other way you can do this is just to go to brushes and then click on eraser, and you can use the eraser to just delete a portion of your image. Oops. And it's a little bit weird if you see it, like it just jumped from my front image to my back image, kind of unexplainably. So there's some things about this that make it inaccurate, but I think that it is useful for sort of how fast it is. Okay, so eraser. I'll quickly just go through these sort of pen types. Sort of self-explanatory, but there's a bunch of different pen types, and you can change the thickness here. Let's see, I'll make this one thicker. And it just makes a lot of different lines that usually I make it pretty thick. Yeah, crayon. And then you can also add like materiality to the brush type, which works better on some brushes than others. But if you just do color, this might only work on the 3D brushes, actually. I think that might be true. Okay. So yeah, those are those. You can add any color. You don't have to use the preset colors. And then there's 2D shapes. So you can draw sort of more regular lines if you don't want it to look like you've just drawn it with your hand. Oops, 2D shapes, all sorts of different shapes here. And then, yeah, similar commands to other programs. If you just hold down Shift, it's going to make the height and width stay the same. And then if I let go of Shift, it's going to let me skew the object. And then you can either just click out of the object or press on the check mark. So let's see, I want to look at this in 3D view. So I'm drawing pretty flat. The strange thing to get used to is also that sometimes it will draw directly on your image. So that's what happened right here. It didn't quite make a shape. It just drew on either of my images. It makes a little more sense when you're drawing in 3D. So I often will use the 3D doodle. This one is one of my favorites. And it's nice because you can give it materiality, and then you can also move it around in 3D Paint. So the 3D moving system basically allows you to click on the surrounding commands to move the object. So right here, this one is just moving it forward and backwards. And if you see, like right here, it starts to intersect with my image. And then to rotate, I just use this at the top. This is rotating along the x-axis and then rotating along the y. So this can be useful for sort of like collaging together 2D and 3D information in sort of like strange or like perspectives that don't quite make sense. So now I'm just gonna copy and paste this. I'm just using like Control-C, Control-V, and copying this around. Let's see. Another one that's useful is this 3D doodle. Let's go to something else. You can draw like free form shape. And if you see it, it makes it a little bit flat. If you want to expand this shape, you can by just dragging. Well, first I turned it so I could look at the side that I wanted to expand. And then I just was dragging these. It also is possible, I'm not going to go through it, but it's possible to just import this 3D information like into Rhino if you wanted to. Okay, so I'm going to put this over here. Okay. And then there's a whole bunch of other more typical 3D shapes here. So it looks really flat when you first put it in. You just kind of have to rotate so you can see what you have here. And then place it in however you want. Let's see. Okay. There's also some people models, which are sometimes helpful. The only thing is it's just like one person, one guy, one lady. They have those as 3D shapes. And then they have this library that sort of has a bunch of like silly stuff in it. Oops, how do I get out of here? Okay, I don't want that. Okay. Okay, we're in 3D shapes. So if we go over to stickers, what you can do is use this to sort of texture map onto objects that you've placed in the scene. So see if I just add a sticker. I'm gonna get one of the sketches I had earlier. So I just made a new custom sticker as I did with the background. So what you can do with this, if you see, it's just kind of trying to guess which object I want to put it on as it goes around the page. So this, if I drag it over to my cube, it's gonna map itself onto the cube. And I can sort of scale however I want here. And then it does it sort of inaccurately, or it sort of related to the view that you're in. So the sides that I was looking at have the image in accurate dimensions, and it's kind of just stretched across the other images. But I think it works if you want to kind of quickly put, you could put a material on. I think they have a couple of like generic materials, but you can import basically anything in as a sticker. Let's see. Yeah, or you can use these materials and just map it on like that. And if I press the stamp button, it's just going to make a duplicate of of the same one that I'm already working with. So I can drag it around. Okay. I just press delete to get out of that. Yeah, so just you can use the stickers to add texture like that, or you can use it as a sort of collaging method to add multiple layers of images in here. Text you might use, but it's pretty straightforward. You can add text in 3D or 2D. And then there's also the option if you wanted to do some sort of filter on top of it, which can help sometimes if you want to kind of try to like unite the things in the image using some filter. And then, so let's see, I think I've gone through just about all of the options in here. Canvas, if you want to put that back behind it. And then to save this, you have a couple of options. You can save it as a 3D model, which they're kind of large files, but if you're going to keep working on it, I would save it as that. save it as Paint 3D if you want to keep editing it. And then you can save it as an image. The thing that's kind of weird is if you see here, like it's trying to save my whole, like a view of the entire 3D space. So I have this sort of blue background around it. And then you can see the edges that I may or may not want. So you can adjust this if you don't like the default that it gave you. And you just, the edge, the white edge here is what it's gonna crop to. So if I didn't wanna see those edges, I could just zoom in. You can also like still orbit in 3D space here if you want to adjust the angle. And then you can change the aspect ratio if I don't like what it's, so let's say I want to do a square here or something. And then to pan, you're going to do Alt plus left click. You can adjust this. Okay. And then just press OK. And then it's going to just save that view that I had just set. I can change the width and height of the pixels here. You can also make it a transparent background, which isn't really going to have an effect except for this like badly cropped part at the top here. But if you wanted to put this into Photoshop or something afterwards, you can just turn this on and then save it as a PNG. So if I do this, I can just save, yeah, usual save options. Okay, does anyone have any questions about this?
Do you have any layers properties? Can I save layers by doing each step?
So that would be the downside of 3D Paint, is there's not really layers in here since everything is just these sort of individual objects. So yeah, it sort of depends on how complicated your sketch is. If it's going to be something that has a lot of layers, I would maybe use Photoshop, or maybe use like several 3D Paint images and then composite them in Photoshop.
You mentioned you can import some of this 3D information into Rhino. Is that like simple, or if you could show maybe like?
Yes, let's see. Yeah, I haven't done this in a while, so I can just see if how much it gets in here. I know that this, like the 3D objects are definitely importable into Rhino. I'm not totally sure how the, like a whole scene would import. I haven't ever tried that.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, thank you, Milosh. Okay, bye.
Okay, so it did, I just, let's see, let me just go through what I did really quick. I just did file, save as, I saved it as a 3D model. And then I saved it as a .glb file, which I have no idea what that is, but it opens in Rhino. And then I just went to Rhino and did import. And if you see, it has all my shapes as they were. Wow, okay. And it actually has everything texture mapped, which is really surprising. The only thing it doesn't have is the one that was like shiny gold is showing up as black. The only thing is it does import as a mesh, which can be kind of annoying to work with. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty cool. I haven't sort of explored this very far, but I think that would be like a really interesting way to use this just because that's way faster than texture mapping anything in Rhino.
Ashley, can you import like 3D meshes into this software and work from there? Like take something, make it in Rhino, bring it in here to texture map it, or?
That is interesting. I've also not tried that, but I wonder if I have anything. Import. Oh, let's see. It so far doesn't like my, I don't think it can open directly a Rhino model, but maybe I can just try this mesh. Wow, that's very strange. Somehow like also imported the shadows. Let me see if I can just export. This.
I think I saw 3MF.
Oh, there,
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Oh, oops. Hold on. Insert. Okay, yeah, that seems to be fine. It looks like you can just do any mesh, save it as a .3mf, and then it will just import back into 3D Paint. That also, yeah, that could be interesting to see if you change the texture mapping in Rhino, what happens when you bring it back in, because I'm not sure what happened. Anything else? So I was thinking on, let's see, Saturday, I would show 2 other softwares, which are Autodesk Sketchbook and then Clone, which is the 3D scanning software. But I mean, if anyone is interested in, like, feel free, of course, just to look at those as well. And then I thought it would be great if everyone could just like make something and kind of try to test out the tools and maybe like, I don't know, like what are the limits of it, where we can see kind of what variety as possible between just Photoshop and Paint 3D, and then we can sort of take a look at that on Thursday together. Does that sound good? Okay. And then I sent out with the first email I sent, like if anyone wants to talk more or if you have problems with any of the software, I'm happy to like meet with people one-on-one if it's easier, because it's kind of a strange format of digital tutorial. And yeah, I think that's it. And I'll also make this recording, I'll send a Google Drive with this recording if anyone wants to look at it again. I am sharing the screen.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you on Thursday.
Yeah. See everyone on Thursday.